Cops called black woman's badge fake. Didn't know she's internal affairs, investigating. That afternoon, the sun was shining brightly over the city, and the streets were alive with the usual hum of traffic and pedestrians. Maya was driving her black sedan, carefully navigating the intersections while keeping an eye on the neighborhood she had been assigned to monitor for weeks. This part of the city had a reputation for petty crimes, from shoplifting to small-scale scams, and Maya's job was to quietly observe patterns, gather intelligence, and ensure that any signs of trouble were noticed before they escalated. As she approached a busy corner near a convenience store, Maya noticed a small group of people outside. Some appeared to be arguing, while others lingered near the entrance in a way that made her instincts alert. She had learned over the years that small, seemingly insignificant incidents could often reveal larger problems. Slowing her car, she parked a short distance away and watched from her window. The people outside the store were animated, their voices carrying across the street, and Maya could see a man fidgeting nervously near the cash register through the glass door. Her gut told her something was off, though nothing in particular seemed to demand immediate action yet. She reached for her notebook and began to jot down observations. Every movement, every glance, every interaction could be a piece of the larger puzzle she was trying to assemble. While Maya worked with a quiet focus, she noticed a pair of uniformed officers approaching her vehicle. At first, she assumed they were just patrolling the area like she was. However, as they got closer, their body language changed. There was a tension in their posture, a subtle edge to their movements that made her immediately cautious. Something in the way they looked at her, a mixture of suspicion and disbelief, set off a familiar alarm that Maya had learned to trust after years in the field. "Step out of the vehicle," one of the officers commanded, his tone firm, leaving no room for argument. Maya kept her hands on the steering wheel, her calm demeanor masking the rush of adrenaline. She took a deep breath and complied, slowly opening the car door and stepping out in a way that was deliberate and professional. Her badge was clipped to her belt, glinting in the sunlight, and her eyes met the officer's with a steady gaze. "Good afternoon, officers." "Is there a problem?" she asked politely but firmly. The officer's eyes narrowed as he looked at her badge. "License and badge," he demanded, his tone sharp. "We need to see both." Maya reached into her coat pocket and produced her official identification, handing it to him. "Here you go. I am Detective Maya Thompson, Internal Affairs Division. I am currently monitoring this area as part of an investigation." The officer blinked, a flicker of confusion passing across his face. He glanced at his partner, who was still standing slightly behind him, arms crossed. "Internal, what?" he stammered. "Internal affairs," Maya repeated calmly. "I oversee investigations of officers to ensure proper conduct and accountability. You may want to verify my credentials with headquarters if you are unsure." For a moment, there was silence. The street seemed to hold its breath as the officers exchanged uneasy looks. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the tension and the unusual interaction unfolding before them. Bystanders whispered to each other, some pulling out their phones, curious about the situation. Maya remained composed, aware that any sudden movement or change in tone could escalate the tension unnecessarily. The second officer finally spoke, his voice a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. "Ma'am, we don't usually see internal affairs officers in the field like this. Are you sure this is real?" Maya smiled slightly, a gesture meant to ease the tension, though it carried an unmistakable authority. "I assure you, it is real. You are obligated to respect my authority, just as you would any other officer. I am here to ensure that the law is followed, including proper procedure by all officers on duty." The first officer shuffled his feet, clearly uncomfortable, his eyes darting around as if looking for a hidden camera or some explanation for the situation. We We just want to make sure everything is legitimate. This is unusual." Maya nodded, understanding their hesitation. It was not uncommon for officers to doubt the legitimacy of someone in her position, especially when that person happened to be a black woman, professionally dressed, confident, and operating with authority in a space where they expected unquestioned dominance. Years of experience had taught Maya to navigate these moments with grace, and she did so now, keeping her voice steady and her posture unyielding. As the officers continued to question her, Maya explained briefly that she was investigating complaints involving officers in the precinct, some of which had occurred in the very area they were now patrolling. She mentioned that her presence was routine but necessary, and that she had observed the area to collect evidence without drawing undue attention. The officers' expressions shifted from skepticism to shock as the reality of the situation became clear. They were being confronted by someone with authority over their actions, someone whose job was to hold them accountable. A few onlookers murmured to each other, astonished at the irony of the situation. Maya's professionalism under pressure was evident to everyone watching. Her calm, deliberate manner contrasted sharply with the officers' growing discomfort. It was a rare sight, and it reminded the small crowd that authority came in many forms, and sometimes it arrived unexpectedly. Maya continued to explain the importance of internal affairs, describing how her division worked to ensure that all officers upheld the law without prejudice or misconduct. She spoke with clarity and precision, her words chosen carefully to educate without escalating the situation further. The officers listened, realizing that their assumptions had been mistaken and that Maya's role was legitimate, critical, and completely above board. After several tense minutes, the officers finally lowered their stance, a silent acknowledgement of her authority and the professionalism she had displayed. They stepped back, and Maya used the moment to remind them that cooperation and respect were essential in law enforcement, not only for the safety of officers, but for the community they served. She returned her ID to her pocket and retracted her badge, her presence having left an impression not just on the officers but on the bystanders who had witnessed the encounter. As Maya returned to her car, she reflected on the encounter. It was a stark reminder of the challenges black women faced in law enforcement, where authority was often questioned and competence doubted. Yet, it was also a reaffirmation of her purpose, a reinforcement of why her work mattered. Every observation, every careful investigation, every moment of standing firm under scrutiny contributed to a system that needed accountability, fairness, and courage. Driving away, Maya felt a renewed sense of focus. She knew that the situation at the convenience store was only a small piece of a larger puzzle, a glimpse into the systemic issues that required her attention and diligence. She also knew that moments like these, where authority was challenged and professionalism prevailed, were powerful reminders of the importance of integrity, patience, and perseverance in law enforcement. The city continued its rhythm around her, unaware of the layers of oversight and vigilance that kept it running smoothly. Maya merged back into traffic, ready to continue her work, her mind sharp, her instincts alert, and her resolve unshaken. The day had begun as ordinary, but it had turned into a lesson in perception, authority, and the quiet, steady power of doing what was right, even when it was questioned. For Maya, it was just another day on the job, but it was also a day that would stay in her memory, a day when she reminded the officers, and perhaps the community, that integrity, calm authority, and expertise could turn moments of doubt into lessons of respect, awareness, and accountability. After the traffic stop, Maya Thompson sat in her black sedan for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady herself. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city streets. She felt a mix of emotions, satisfaction at handling the encounter with calm professionalism, but also a simmering awareness of the challenges that came with her position. Being a black woman in law enforcement, especially in internal affairs, meant that her authority was sometimes questioned, even in situations where her credentials and experience were unquestionable. But today had been a reminder of why she did what she did, to ensure fairness, accountability, and justice, even when it wasn't easy. Once she had regained her composure, Maya drove back toward the precinct, her mind already shifting into investigative mode. The incident had reminded her that her role was more than oversight. It was about fostering trust, both within the police force and the community. Her work required patience, diligence, and the ability to remain calm under scrutiny. She knew that moments like the one on the street weren't just random. They reflected deeper issues, biases, and misconceptions that existed within the system, and it was part of her job to address them thoughtfully and professionally. Back at the Internal Affairs office, Maya entered the building quietly, nodding to the receptionist who knew her well. The office was a hub of activity, with officers reviewing reports, answering phone calls, and coordinating investigations. Maya moved toward her desk, a corner space piled with files, folders, and notebooks. She placed her bag down and pulled out the notes she had made during her observation earlier in the day. Even though the street encounter had been intense, she had jotted down details meticulously. Every interaction, every gesture, every expression of doubt or confusion from the officers. In internal affairs, documentation was critical. Every observation could later support accountability and reveal patterns of behavior that needed correction. Maya took a moment to review her plan for the next stage of the investigation. The traffic stop had brought the officers' attitudes into sharp relief, and she realized that what she had observed could be more than a simple misunderstanding. She opened the case files she had been assigned, reviewing complaints from previous months. Some were minor procedural errors, while others indicated deeper patterns of racial profiling and misuse of authority. Maya's role was to examine these patterns carefully, gather evidence, and ensure that each officer's actions were evaluated fairly and accurately. Her partner in internal affairs, Detective Luis Ramirez, approached her desk, holding a tablet with updated information. "Maya, I heard what happened outside," he said quietly, a hint of admiration in his voice. "Those officers didn't know what hit them." Maya smiled faintly. "They didn't handle it well, but I kept it professional. That's all we can do: stay calm, stay factual, and do our job. It's not personal, it's accountability." Lewis nodded. "Still, it's remarkable. You kept your cool even when they doubted you because of assumptions." "That's not easy." Maya leaned back in her chair, thinking about the delicate balance she had to maintain. Internal affairs was often viewed with suspicion by other officers, sometimes even resentment. Investigating colleagues required not just factual accuracy, but emotional intelligence. Officers could feel defensive, even threatened, when being scrutinized. Maya had learned to approach each situation with a combination of authority and empathy, understanding that the goal was not punishment for its own sake, but reform, accountability, and ultimately, the integrity of the force. She turned her attention back to the case files, beginning to cross-reference complaints with patrol logs, radio transcripts, and previous IA reports. It was meticulous work, requiring patience and precision. Hours passed as Maya and Lewis compiled notes, flagged inconsistencies, and developed a timeline of incidents. Each detail mattered. A single overlooked action could change the interpretation of an event, and in internal affairs, clarity was everything. As they worked, Maya reflected on the irony of the traffic stop earlier that day. The officers' initial disbelief had been influenced by unconscious bias. They had judged her based on appearances and assumptions rather than facts. For Maya, it was a reminder that even trained law enforcement professionals were not immune to prejudice. Part of her work, she realized, was not just investigating individual complaints, but also educating officers and encouraging them to recognize and address their own biases. Change required awareness, and awareness started with moments like the one she had experienced outside the convenience store. Around mid-afternoon, the officers involved in the stop arrived at the precinct to submit statements. Maya had arranged to be present, not to intimidate, but to ensure that the facts were accurately recorded. The first officer, still visibly uncomfortable, hesitated as he approached her desk. Maya greeted him professionally. "Thank you for coming in. Let's go over the events from today carefully so that the record is complete." The officer nodded, a mixture of relief and apprehension in his eyes. He began recounting the traffic stop, carefully describing each detail, each exchange. Maya listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. She maintained a neutral tone, focused on facts, not emotions. Her presence, calm but authoritative, reminded the officers that internal affairs was about fairness, not intimidation. As the interview progressed, Maya noted several inconsistencies in their statements. While not deliberate falsehoods, the gaps and contradictions revealed misunderstandings and assumptions that could influence their behavior on the street. She asked thoughtful questions to encourage honesty and self-reflection, guiding the officers to consider how their actions might have been perceived by someone in her position. Slowly, the officers began to understand the significance of their behavior and the importance of accountability in law enforcement. Meanwhile, Lewis reviewed reports from previous IA investigations related to the same precinct. He noticed recurring issues. Officers had been accused of procedural errors, and complaints had been filed about biased decision-making. Together, Maya and Lewis pieced together a broader picture, connecting dots that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Each detail contributed to a larger understanding of systemic patterns, and it became clear that intervention, guidance, and reform were necessary to ensure fair policing practices. By the end of the day, Maya and Lewis had compiled a comprehensive report summarizing the traffic stop, the officers' statements, and the broader context of their investigation. Maya reviewed the document carefully, ensuring clarity, accuracy, and professionalism. Every word mattered. In internal affairs, precision was critical because reports could influence disciplinary actions, training programs, and policy changes. Mistakes or exaggerations could undermine trust, while careful documentation reinforced credibility and accountability. As Maya prepared to leave the office, she reflected on the day's events. The traffic stop had started as a simple observation of a potential crime, but had evolved into a powerful reminder of the challenges and responsibilities of her role. She had faced doubt, skepticism, and bias head-on, demonstrating that authority was earned through professionalism, knowledge, and composure. The experience reinforced her commitment to her work and her belief that integrity was the cornerstone of effective law enforcement. Driving home that evening, Maya felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. The city lights sparkled against the darkening sky, and the streets were alive with people moving through their routines. She knew that her work in internal affairs was ongoing, that every day brought new challenges and opportunities to make a difference. The officers she had confronted earlier would likely remember the encounter, not as a threat, but as a lesson in respect, accountability, and the importance of seeing beyond assumptions. Maya also thought about the broader implications of her role. She represented more than herself. She represented a commitment to fairness, to justice, and to the idea that every officer, regardless of background, had a responsibility to uphold the law ethically and equitably. Moments like the one outside the convenience store were microcosms of a larger struggle, a reminder that vigilance, professionalism, and courage were essential in maintaining the integrity of the police force and fostering trust with the community. That night, as Maya prepared for rest, she reviewed her notes once more. Each observation, each interaction, each detail of the day's events was carefully recorded, forming a foundation for the next steps in the investigation. She knew that her presence in the field, her careful attention to detail, and her ability to remain calm under scrutiny were vital tools in promoting justice and accountability. And though the traffic stop had been an unexpected challenge, Maya understood that such moments were part of the work she had chosen, a work that demanded courage, clarity, and unwavering commitment. She was ready for whatever came next, confident in her ability to navigate complexity, confront bias, and uphold the principles that guided her every action. As she closed her notebook and set it aside, Maya felt a quiet sense of pride. Today had tested her patience and professionalism, but it had also reaffirmed her purpose. She knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new observations, and new opportunities to make a difference. And she was ready, as always, to face them with integrity, determination, and the calm authority that defined her as an internal affairs detective. The next morning, Detective Maya Thompson arrived at the Internal Affairs office early, as she often did. The city was just beginning to stir, the hum of traffic and distant sirens creating a rhythm she had grown accustomed to over the years. She moved through the building with quiet confidence, nodding to colleagues who were already reviewing files, making calls, and preparing for the day ahead. Today, her focus was sharper than ever. The incident from the previous day, the traffic stop, the officer's doubt, the confrontation, was now part of a larger investigation, and Maya knew that thoroughness would be key to uncovering the truth. She settled at her desk and opened the files she had compiled the day before. Notes, reports, and observations were meticulously organized, each detail documented with precision. Internal affairs required this level of diligence because every investigation had consequences, not only for the officers involved but for the integrity of the entire police department. Maya began reviewing additional complaints and reports related to the precinct where the traffic stop had occurred. Over time, a troubling pattern began to emerge, recurring complaints about procedural errors, biased decision-making, and instances of officers questioning authority improperly. Her partner, Detective Luis Ramirez, joined her desk, holding a stack of new reports. "Maya, you need to see these," he said quietly, spreading the documents in front of her. "These are complaints filed over the last 6 months. Some overlap with the officers you stopped yesterday." Maya leaned in, her eyes scanning the reports. Each document told a story: missed protocols, instances of aggression, and subtle signs of bias in routine stops. She took note of every detail, cross-referencing them with the patrol logs and observations from the traffic stop. "We need to be meticulous," she said. "Patterns like these can't be ignored. Every detail counts, and we need to be sure our findings are accurate and fair." Lewis nodded in agreement. "Agreed. If this goes higher up, we need solid evidence. Not just accusations, but facts, dates, times, witness statements, everything." Maya smiled faintly. "Exactly. Facts first, assumptions last. That's how we maintain credibility." They spent the morning contacting witnesses from previous incidents, reviewing surveillance footage, and examining dispatch records. Each interaction revealed small but significant details. A witness recalled seeing officers respond harshly to a young man who had done nothing wrong. Another mentioned an officer bypassing standard procedure when handling a report. Maya carefully documented everything, aware that these patterns, when compiled, would illustrate the need for accountability and corrective action. Around mid-morning, the officers involved in the traffic stop arrived at the Internal Affairs office for a follow-up meeting. Maya had requested their presence to ensure that the record was complete and accurate. The tension in the room was palpable. The officers were visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, avoiding eye contact, and fidgeting with their notes. Maya maintained her calm, professional demeanor, projecting authority without intimidation. She began the meeting with a brief summary of the previous day's events and explained the purpose of the follow-up: to clarify details, address discrepancies, and ensure that all statements aligned with documented evidence. The officers started recounting their version of the traffic stop, but Maya's careful questioning soon highlighted gaps in their recollection. One officer admitted to feeling confused when Maya presented her credentials, while another acknowledged assumptions that had influenced their behavior. Maya guided the conversation gently but firmly, helping the officers reflect on how their actions were perceived and the importance of following protocol without bias. As the meeting progressed, Maya noticed subtle signs of realization among the officers. They began to understand that their initial reactions were influenced by unconscious assumptions, and that their behavior had consequences beyond the immediate encounter. Maya did not scold or berate them. Instead, she used the opportunity to educate and foster accountability. Her approach was professional, focused on learning and improvement rather than punishment alone. Meanwhile, Lewis continued reviewing surveillance footage from previous complaints. One video captured an officer ignoring a protocol for documenting a minor altercation, while another showed a dismissive attitude toward a witness reporting a theft. Each clip reinforced the patterns Maya had identified. Together, they compiled a comprehensive record that connected individual incidents to broader behavioral trends, illustrating the need for corrective measures and training. By early afternoon, Maya and Lewis had created a detailed report outlining the findings of the investigation so far. The report included timestamps, witness statements, patrol logs, and observations from the traffic stop. Maya reviewed each section carefully, ensuring clarity, accuracy, and fairness. Every word mattered. Internal affairs reports could influence disciplinary actions, policy revisions, and even public perception. Precision was not just a professional requirement, it was a moral responsibility. After completing the draft, Maya scheduled meetings with the officers, supervisors to review the findings. She wanted to ensure transparency and collaboration, emphasizing that the goal was accountability and improvement, not conflict. The supervisors, initially skeptical, were struck by the thoroughness and professionalism of the investigation. They began to recognize that the patterns Maya had uncovered were serious and needed immediate attention. Throughout the day, Maya reflected on the broader implications of her work. Internal affairs was often misunderstood, seen as punitive rather than protective. Yet Maya knew that her role was crucial in maintaining trust within the police force and with the community. Investigations like these reinforced the principle that law enforcement must be accountable, unbiased, and fair. Each detail she documented, each observation she made, contributed to a culture of integrity and respect. As the day drew to a close, Maya prepared to submit the report to the higher authorities within the department. She double-checked every entry, every statement, every piece of evidence. Accuracy was paramount. She knew that once the report was reviewed, it could lead to disciplinary measures, training programs, and even policy changes. Maya felt the weight of responsibility, but also a sense of fulfillment. Her work was making a tangible difference, ensuring that officers were held accountable and that the community could trust the system meant to protect them. Leaving the office, Maya took a moment to step outside. The city was alive with evening activity, cars honking, pedestrians chatting, lights twinkling in the distance. She paused for a moment, reflecting on the day's events and the path ahead. The officers involved in the traffic stop had begun to understand the impact of their actions, and the investigation was bringing clarity and accountability to the department. But Maya knew her work was never done. Each day presented new challenges, new patterns to identify, and new opportunities to uphold justice. As she walked to her car, Maya thought about the lessons embedded in the traffic stop. It had been a confrontation that tested her patience and professionalism, but it had also revealed the importance of maintaining calm authority in the face of doubt and bias. She had demonstrated that competence, composure, and integrity could transform tense situations into moments of clarity and learning. The officers had been challenged, the department had been reminded of its responsibilities, and Maya had reinforced the principles that guided her work. Driving home that evening, Maya reflected on the journey ahead. Internal affairs investigations were often complex, requiring patience, precision, and an unwavering commitment to fairness. She knew that the report she had submitted would trigger changes, reforms, and conversations within the department. Her role was not just to document wrongdoing, but to ensure that lessons were learned and improvements were made. Each case was a step toward a more accountable, ethical, and professional police force. Maya arrived home, feeling the familiar mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. She reviewed her notes one final time, ensuring that every observation and piece of evidence was securely filed and clearly documented. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new meetings, and continued work on the investigation. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She had navigated a difficult situation with skill, maintained her professionalism under pressure, and reinforced the importance of integrity and accountability in law enforcement. As night settled over the city, Maya knew that her work was far from finished. The investigation would continue, patterns would be scrutinized further, and actions would be taken to ensure that justice and fairness prevailed. But she also knew that each step she took, each careful observation, each well-documented report contributed to a stronger, more transparent system. Internal affairs was not just a division within the police force. It was a vital guardian of ethics, accountability, and trust. Maya went to bed that night with a sense of purpose. She was aware of the challenges, the skepticism, and the moments of doubt that often accompanied her role. But she was also confident in her abilities, her experience, and her commitment to justice. Tomorrow would bring new investigations, new observations, and new opportunities to make a difference. And she was ready, as always, to face them with professionalism, patience, and unwavering integrity. The following weeks moved quickly, but the weight of the investigation stayed with Maya Thompson every day. After submitting the final internal affairs report, she knew the process had entered a critical stage. The evidence was clear, carefully documented, and impossible to ignore. What had started as a routine observation had grown into a full review of conduct within the precinct. Now the responsibility shifted to leadership, oversight committees, and review boards, but Maya's role was far from finished. She continued coming into the office early, not because she was asked to, but because she believed in being prepared. Emails filled her inbox, questions from supervisors, requests for clarification, and notices of scheduled review hearings. Each message reminded her that accountability was not abstract. It affected real people, real careers, and real trust between law enforcement and the community. Maya approached every follow-up with the same calm professionalism she had shown from the start. She answered questions clearly, never exaggerating, never minimizing. Her strength was not in raising her voice or forcing conclusions, but in letting facts speak for themselves. Dates, times, procedures, statements, everything aligned. The truth, once organized properly, carried its own authority. Soon, the officers involved in the investigation were placed under temporary review status. This was standard procedure, but it sent a clear message throughout the department. Conversations changed. Patrol briefings grew quieter. Officers became more careful, more aware that actions mattered and that assumptions could have serious consequences. Maya noticed the shift immediately. During a routine visit to the precinct, she saw officers greeting community members with more patience. Reports were completed more thoroughly. Body language softened. It was not perfect and it would take time, but change had begun. That, to Maya, was the real purpose of internal affairs, not just consequences, but improvement. One afternoon, she was asked to attend a departmental review meeting. Senior leaders, legal advisors, and training coordinators were present. The room was formal, but the mood was serious and thoughtful. Maya was invited to explain her findings and speak about what the investigation revealed beyond individual actions. She stood calmly, her voice steady. "This investigation is not about labeling anyone as good or bad," she said. "It's about recognizing patterns, understanding how assumptions influence behavior, and ensuring that our standards are applied equally. Accountability protects the public, but it also protects officers who do their jobs correctly." There was silence after she finished speaking, not discomfort, but reflection. One of the senior officials nodded slowly. "Your report is one of the most thorough we've seen," he said, "and your conduct during the initial incident reflects exactly why internal affairs matters." The department approved additional training for the precinct, focusing on communication, professional verification procedures, and unbiased decision-making. Supervisors were instructed to reinforce protocol without exception. The officers involved faced disciplinary actions consistent with department policy, not excessive, but firm and corrective. Maya did not feel satisfaction in that outcome. What she felt was responsibility fulfilled. Word of the incident eventually reached the public through local media, though details were handled carefully. Headlines focused not on scandal, but on oversight, professionalism, and reform. Maya's name was mentioned only briefly, but her actions became an example of calm authority and ethical leadership. Community groups began reaching out to the department, requesting forums and discussions. Maya was invited to attend one such meeting, not as a speaker but as an observer. She sat quietly as residents shared concerns, hopes, and frustrations. Listening was as important as investigating. After the meeting, an elderly woman approached her. "I didn't know someone like you worked there," the woman said softly. Maya smiled. "There are many of us, we just don't always get noticed." That moment stayed with her. Back at the office, life returned to its steady rhythm. New cases arrived. New files filled her desk. But something had changed, not just in the department but within Maya herself. The traffic stop that began everything had reminded her why representation, integrity, and calm strength mattered so deeply. She thought back to that moment, the disbelief, the questioning of her badge, the tension in the air. It could have escalated. It could have turned into something damaging. Instead, she had chosen patience, clarity, and professionalism. That choice had made all the difference. One evening, as she prepared to leave work, Lewis stopped by her desk. "You know," he said, "people are talking, in a good way." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Talking about what?" "About how you handled everything. The stop, the investigation, the follow-through. You set a standard." She nodded thoughtfully. "Standards only matter if we keep them." Lewis smiled. "Exactly." As weeks turned into months, the changes continued. Complaints from the precinct decreased. Supervisors reported improved communication. Officers became more willing to verify information before reacting. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Maya never saw herself as a hero. She saw herself as a professional doing necessary work. But she understood that her presence mattered. Her calm authority mattered. Her refusal to react emotionally, even when doubted, mattered. Late one night, she sat at home reviewing notes for a new case. Outside, the city hummed quietly. She closed her notebook and leaned back, allowing herself a moment of reflection. She had chosen a difficult path, one that required confronting uncomfortable truths and standing firm even when misunderstood. But moments like this reminded her why she stayed. Integrity was not loud. Authority did not need to shout. Change did not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it came through a woman standing calmly beside her car, holding a badge that others doubted, yet refusing to doubt herself. The department moved forward. The officers learned. The community saw effort. And Maya continued her work, steady and unseen by many, but essential all the same. The story did not end with applause or celebration. It ended with something more powerful: accountability, growth, and a system slightly stronger than before. And for Maya Thompson, that was more than enough.